Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for coming to our Alzheimer's and Dementia program for today. This is part of an ongoing collaboration between the Williamson County Public Library and the Alzheimer's Association of Tennessee. Today's speaker is the founder of the Elder Law of Nashville and has been practicing law since 1977. Her accolades include, but are not limited to, the Best of the Bar, being named multiple times in the Nashville Business Journal. Being named multiple times in the Nashville Business Journal, a Mid-South super lawyer as far as elder law in Law and Politics magazine, and being listed among Nashville's best lawyers. She currently is on the faculty of the Nashville School of Law for teaching elder law, and was an adjunct professor at Vanderbilt for law from 1984 to 2000, and was the first woman to chair the board of professional responsibility for the Supreme Court of Tennessee. Please welcome Barbara Moss.
Thank you so much. She did that from memory. That was incredible. I kept thinking she's reading from something. I've given this presentation before, so it makes me a little uncomfortable that everybody's filming it, but you may have seen it before. But I'm very passionate about helping plan for the future, because I do believe that we all know that planning for the future can bring us peace of mind in the present. So here's where I started out. In 1977, I was the first woman hired by any of the big downtown law firms. One of those things is not like the other. And I wanted to be a trial lawyer, and they had not invented the phrase glass ceiling. I had no idea it was going to be hard. And I was a trial lawyer for quite a while. I had my first child as a third-year law student, my second child at this law firm, and when my girls were 7 and 4, I became a single mom, and I was a single mom and a trial lawyer for 22 years. And then I married a psychiatrist and psychoanalyst. One of my friends said, that'll save you a lot of money. But what I found out is that psychoanalysts never retire. So I looked, you can't do litigation forever. I mean, I picked up my head and said, this is a little stressful, and looked around and saw that seniors were the most underrepresented people. We're 1 in 7 of the population. The lack of focus on what seniors need is kind of amazing. So 11 years ago, in true trial lawyer fashion, I said, I'm going to start my own firm doing things I don't know how to do. And what I love about elder law is I get to take people's anxiety away. So there you go. That's my story. Now, unbelievably enough, in the Sunday Tennessean, if anybody still gets the paper, there was an article about caregivers on Sunday. We are nearly 1 in 4 of American adults is a caregiver. Caregivers, they define it as caregiving for seniors or a family member with a disability. Nearly 63 million adults have provided care to adults or children with medical condition or disability in the last year. That's a 45% increase over the last decade. Now, and the Tennessean, by the way, was quoting a recent report from the AARP and the National Alliance for Caregiving. So, wow, chasing my demographic. There you go. So one of the first things I want to tell you, if you're here because you're a caregiver, I'm going to be talking about legal documents. The capacity to sign a legal document is not a diagnosis. Lawyers determine who has the capacity to sign a legal document. Partly because there's different capacities needed to sign different documents. So, sometimes you'll send a client to get an evaluation by a medical doctor or a neuropsychologist, but most of the time it's lawyers that are making that decision. So so you shouldn't think, oh, my loved one has dementia, they can't sign anything. That's just really not true. Okay. There are 3 components to planning as we become older. 1 is planning to manage our health care. 2 is planning to manage our finances. And the 3rd part is managing our standard of living while we manage chronic conditions. Maintain our standard of living while we manage chronic conditions. So let's talk about managing health care. Who's going to make decisions if we become incapacitated? And will our wishes about our end-of-life care be honored? So who's going to make decisions? What you need is a durable power of attorney for health care matters. Why do they call it durable? Well, first of all, you should know that our law comes from English law. And in England, if you signed a power of attorney and a horse kicked you in the head and you were in a coma, your power of attorney wasn't good anymore. So the second thing you need to know about, in England, lawyers were paid by the word. Now you know something about lawyers. But anyway, it's called a durable power of attorney, and it gives you, your agent, the ability to make decisions for you. And why do you need one? First of all, it lets you choose who's going to make that decision. And secondly, it gives you the opportunity to talk to your family about your wishes. Now, in my parents' generation, my dad was in World War II, parents didn't talk to their children about what they wanted. But I am a big advocate of talking to your children about what you want. Because what I've seen of fights among families is it's not about greed. Sometimes it's about greed, but mostly it's about hurt feelings. Mostly it's about hurt feelings. So you say, I have 2 daughters. You say to one, well, I picked Rachel to be my financial partner because she's a banker. And I picked you because you've got some experience in health. Whatever. Talk to your kids. Talk to your people. Now, what about end-of-life wishes? All of the famous cases in America were women in their 20s. Now, you remember probably Terry Schiavo. Wow, what a nightmare. The one that went up to the U.S. Supreme Court was Nancy Cruzan. Nancy Cruzan lived in Missouri. She was in an automobile accident. She was thrown into a puddle of water. When they fished her out, she was brain dead. It went all the way up to the parents wanted to disconnect the machines. And the state of Missouri said, no, we have an interest in her life. It went all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, which said we all have the ability to decide what happens to our bodies as long as we have capacity. And they said, well, but, the state of Missouri does have an interest in her life. They sent it back down. And fortunately, the parents had found some people that she had communicated with that testified she didn't want to live her life that way. Okay. It's really important to have that document about your end-of-life wishes. Now, you always get palliative care. You always get pain management. You always get whatever you want to eat or drink. A living will. I never do living wills, and here's why. They only cover 2 conditions. If you're in a coma or if you're in the final stages of a terminal illness. It doesn't cover dementia. So doctors and lawyers in Tennessee came together to write a 2-page form called an advance directive. Now, I never recommend online forms except this one, because this advance directive You can find it Tennessee.gov. Lets you express your wishes about a permanent unconscious condition, about permanent confusion. And I like the way they define it. They say, you know, you get to say yes or no. I do or don't want heroic measures to keep me alive. And permanent confusion, they say, when I can't recognize or have a clear conversation with my loved ones. Dependent on all activities of daily living. Can't breathe, can't whatever, and in the final stages of an end-stage illness. And if any of those conditions are unacceptable to you, you can still specify whether you do or don't want CPR. You do or don't want life support like a ventilator. You do or don't want IV fluids and tube feeding. You do or don't want treatment of for a new condition. Yeah.
Is this only available for Tennessee residents or do all states?
Well, you can download it. I don't know whether it would be good in other states. I don't see why not. Yeah. Now, treatment for a new condition, I say that for last because years ago, they called pneumonia the old man's friend. And I understand that. You know, like I say, it gives you, getting older and dying is complicated. I think that filling out this 2-page form is good, but I've told my husband, for example, if I'm air hungry, let me go out on a cloud of morphine. I don't want to stay around if I'm air hungry. But, you know, this gives you, you know, don't pop a new hip in me if I'm so demented that I can't recognize my loved ones or have a clear, you know, that kind of thing. Gives you a chance to talk to your loved ones about what you want. It provides a place for you to express your wishes about organ donation and burial arrangements. And the nice thing is, this can either be notarized, and it's, you know, when a notary signs off on a document, all they're saying is that they saw you write your name on it. They don't care what you put on it. They saw you write your name. Or it can be signed by 2 witnesses, as long as at least one of them is not taking under your will. So I suggest if you want to do this, you can just have 2 neighbors come over to your house, witness your signature on an advance directive. And, you know, frankly, I think kids going off to college ought to have powers of attorney and that kind of thing. You don't know what's about to happen. We have each of us on our desks at work and in our conference room, we have a crystal ball because it doesn't tell us anything. It doesn't tell us anything. Okay. This is the form you get on Tennessee.gov. I'd say for other online documents, you know, if we could prescribe medications for ourselves, we probably would. It doesn't make it a good idea. I really think that that consulting with a lawyer on a lot of these other documents makes sense. Okay. The second component of planning is planning for our finances. Who's going to make decisions if we become incapacitated? How will we afford health care, home care, assisted living, or nursing home care? And then what will happen to our assets when we die? I'm not going to cover estate planning in this meeting. I'm going to try to leave time for questions at the end, and if you have questions that include estate planning, that's fine. The thing is, most of us know something about estate planning, but what I'm about to talk to you about, I bet you don't know anything about. So we'll take questions at the end. So again, who's going to make financial decisions if we become incapacitated? There are only 2 alternatives. An attorney, in fact, or an agent under a durable power of attorney for financial matters. Sometimes they call that a general power of attorney, or a conservator. It is a misconception that your spouse will have the power to make these decisions. Yes, if you have a joint checking account, yeah, your spouse can write checks, but can they sign your name to an agreement to go into a nursing home or assisted living or whatever. No. A power of attorney for financial matters, again, lets you choose who's going to make financial decisions. It gives you a chance to discuss your decision about who you're appointing, and also about what you want done with the assets in your family. Maybe you say to your children, I really want to make sure that my spouse at home is going to be taken care of. Or I have this railroad stock from my uncle. I'd really like to keep it in the family. Whatever. It avoids an expensive conservatorship proceeding, and it allows for comprehensive planning. Now, why do I keep talking about conservatorships? If you don't sign these documents, your family is going to have to go get a lawyer to draw up a petition to appoint a conservator. A doctor who's seen you within the last 90 days has to fill out a form that you need a conservator, or the court can order you to be seen by a doctor, your doctor, or maybe a forensic psychiatrist or whatever. Then another lawyer called a guardian ad litem is appointed, and that lawyer is the eyes and ears of the court. What they're supposed to find out is, do you need a conservator? And if so, whom should it be? Now, I always tell my staff, I'm going to be an ornery demented person. And when I'm an ornery demented person, I'm going to say, I don't need a conservator. And the judge has to appoint another lawyer, because we can't take away your rights without you being represented. So you are 3 lawyers deep at this point, and that's why I'm saying it can be an expensive process. This one, I think you need a lawyer to draw up. An expert needs to assess costs and comprehensiveness and your assets and your family history. Because the biggest predictor of who's going to fight now is, has your family fought in court in the past? Okay. Now, this is the big one: affording health care, home care, assisted living, or nursing home care. Okay, I only tell one joke. This is it. There are 2 guys standing next to the gallows waiting to be executed. They have the hoods over their heads. And one of them nudges the other one and says, you know, this really is worse than public speaking. So that's how we answered the... But I think that when seniors say they fear outliving their assets more than they fear death, I kind of get that part. You know, I don't want to be a bag lady. So 70% of people turning 65 are going to need some type of long-term care services. These are the numbers from the Genworth Cost of Care Survey for 2024 in the Nashville area. A private room in a nursing home costs $130,000 a year. Semi-private room, $109,000 a year. Assisted living, about $70,000 a year. Adult day services, I'm not convinced about this number. It's gone up and down weirdly in the last couple of years, but they say in 2024 it costs about $13,000. But I know that 50 Forward has opened an adult day services facility in Brentwood. There's very few facilities that'll do adult day services. Anyway, home health aides, 44 hours a week, $73,000 a year. Homemaker services, $73,000 a year. And we all say, oh, we want to die at home. Well, to have 24/7 care at home would cost between $265,000 and $325,000 a year. Now, the New York Times came out with an article. The New York Times publishes articles about seniors, and they published an article where they said, here are 3 recommendations for people who are getting older. They published a lot of articles. I make my students read it. But they said, find your people. rethink the idea of home. Rethink. If there had been if there had been assisted living for single moms, those 22 years that I did it, I would have signed up. Rethink the idea of home. And number 3, consult a professional. Okay. There are 5 buckets of money to pay for health care and retirement. The first one is our private assets. Let me see if I have a slide about that. Yeah. Okay, here are the 5 buckets of money. Our private assets, long-term care insurance, VA aid and attendance, Medicare, look at that E, got weird on that one, and Medicaid or TennCare. So private assets includes uncompensated help from families that was estimated to be $522 billion worth in 2023. The only complicated thing under private assets is something called a reverse mortgage. I rarely, but sometimes recommend this. If you're 95 and you just want to live at home till you die, or your aunt is 95 and all she has is her home and she wants to, yeah, okay. The lender's only security is the house. You can get a lump sum, a line of credit, or a fixed monthly amount. The younger homeowner must be at least 62 if there are 2 homeowners. And it's payable when the last person dies, sells the home, or moves out. Okay, then there's long-term care insurance. So only 10% of people 65 and older have it. I have read in the Wall Street Journal, it was 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 years ago, that this is a wealth preservation strategy. And when I tell you how Medicaid works, you're going to understand what I mean. It's really their target market is people who have a home and $800,000, $1 million and above, really. It's private insurance for nursing home care and usually home health care and assisted living. It has a waiting period, I forget what it's called, 30, 60, or 90 days. I've even seen a 1-year waiting period. And normally, the way it defines it.
Sorry, is there a cutoff? Like, you have to have this so many years before you start
No,
using it?
no. But you have to have it before you get diagnosed with a serious condition.
Okay. So,
Right.
So if you've already been diagnosed with dementia, you can't?
Yeah,
Okay.
you're not going to be able to get it.
But if the other spouse doesn't have it,
They could still get it.
but would that apply for just that one person?
Yeah.
The other person couldn't?
Yeah. Yeah. It usually requires that you need substantial assistance with 2 activities of daily living or supervision because of cognitive impairment. And the activities, I had a client who said, well, I can't brush my hair. That's an activity of daily living. No. The defined activities of daily living are bathing, eating, dressing, toileting, continence, and transferring, getting out of bed, getting out of a chair. Okay, 3rd bucket of money, Medicare. Medicare is the federal health insurance program for people 65 and older. Some people younger than 65 can qualify. If you are entitled because of you can't engage in substantial gainful employment, the magic words, you can get something called SSDI. And if you get SSDI 2 years later, you're automatically enrolled in Medicare. And people with permanent kidney failure and ALS. Medicare Part A, premium free, helps pay for inpatient care. Beneficiaries share costs through deductibles, which is $1,675 in 2025, and copays. Medicare Part B helps pay for doctor services and many outpatient medical services and supplies. It is technically optional because most beneficiaries pay a monthly premium. In 2025, it was $185 a month, unless you were still working, and then it's more. Now, I say it's technically optional. You need to sign up for it when you can, Now, if you still have insurance through your employment, you don't have to sign up. Otherwise, when you're 65, you need to sign up, because if you don't sign up for Part B when you're eligible, you will be penalized for the rest of your life. So it's really important to sign up for Part B. The annual deductible is $257 per year and a 20% copay, and you have to have both A and B to get a Medigap supplement. Prescription drug coverage is Part D. Private insurance for drugs that's federally regulated. No plan's deductible can be higher than $590. That's 2025, a new rule. And beginning in January of 2025, after paying the deductible, there's a cap on costs of $2,000, and then your drug plan pays. Okay. You notice I've not talked about Part C yet. I'm going to come back to that. When you have A and B, which is traditional Medicare, you can get a Medigap policy, and you'll see that they have letters to them, A through N. When I first started doing elder law, the Gerber Company had Medigap policies. Yep, the one that sells baby food. And the reason is there's no underwriting. If Medicare pays, the Medigap policy pays. That makes it easy. So it's going to pay part of your deductible or all of your deductible and copay amounts. Let's come back to Advantage plans. Beginning about 2 years ago, there were as many people in America enrolled in Advantage plans as in traditional Medicare. So it's become very popular. It's extremely advertised during the open enrollment. Seniors get an average of 5 calls a day to try to get them enrolled in Advantage plans. It's private insurance that replaces A and B and usually Part D. These are HMO programs. So you're going to have a list of people that you can use. And if you're a traveler, this is not a great program for you. I don't know what to say about Part C plans. Sometimes they're better, sometimes they're worse. It does make me uncomfortable that private insurance, where we're paying people a whole lot of money, is now gotten in the middle of Medicare too. What does Medicare pay for nursing home care? Well, you know it doesn't pay for assisted living, and you may be surprised to find out it doesn't really pay for Medicare either. If you have been admitted for 3 midnights in an acute care hospital, and I'm not talking about admission for observation, actually admitted, Medicare will pay 100% of the first 20 days if you need rehab. If you continue to need rehab, Medicare, oh, this is so generous, Medicare pays 100% over the $209.50 a day. But at day 101 and beyond, Medicare doesn't pay anything for a nursing home. Okay. VA aid and attendance. This is for wartime veterans. Okay. The amounts are nice. For a married veteran, it's $27.95 a month. A single veteran, $23.58 a month. And the surviving spouse of a veteran, $15.15 a month. And this is not taxable. These are not taxable dollars. Now, I'm talking about, I had a client in yesterday who had exposure to Agent Orange. I'm not talking about service-connected benefits. This is what's called an improved pension plan. So this is not where you get you're disabled because of your service. This is something else. It's aid and attendance. There are 4 criteria. You have to have duty in the military, you have to be sick enough, your income has to be low enough, your assets have to be low enough. And I've said many times that if you think you want to go to law school, they should sit you down and make you read some pages of government regulations and an insurance policy and say, do you really want to do this? Because this is government policy, and I'm going to come back to state policy for Medicaid, which makes you be sick enough, income low enough, and assets low enough, and every definition is different. But for VA aid and attendance, first of all, it's duty in the military. And for a veteran to qualify, a veteran has to have 90 days of active duty, at least one of which was during a defined period of combat, until you get to Gulf War veterans, and then it's 24 months of active duty. Discharge other than a dishonorable discharge. And the surviving spouse, the spouse has to be married to the veteran at the time of the veteran's death. Okay. So if you want to look up defined periods of war, this is what you'd find. So for example, my dad was a veterinarian. He inspected cheese in Wisconsin during World War II. Was he eligible? Yes, because he signed up during a defined period of war. He didn't have to be boots on the ground. Korean conflict, same thing, 90 days of active duty, one of which was during a defined period of war, no boots on the ground. Now, Vietnam is different. For the first part of this in Vietnam, which begins in 1955, up to August 4 of 1964, you had to have had boots on the ground. And then there's a 10, 11-year period where you don't have to have had boots on the ground. You just have to have agreed to serve and serve 90 days. The medical requirements, assistance with 2 or more activities of daily living, and they added walking to that list of 6 that I told you before, or certification by a health professional that you need custodial care, or bedridden, or in a nursing home, or blind. You don't get the maximum check like Social Security. So it doesn't work like Social Security. What happens is they look at your income and see what your expenses are, and you can get the difference. So it can be wonderful if you're in assisted living and you're getting Social Security, and then you get this income from the government. There's an asset limit, and it's $159,240. It increases every year along with Social Security. The home is not counted as part of net worth, and 2 acres, which kind of screws up people living in the country. And then 1 vehicle and personal effects are non-countable. But weirdly enough, the VA counts 1 year of income as part of your assets. See what I mean about government regulations? Okay, so that's your net worth. And then now I want to talk about Medicaid, which is called TennCare here in Tennessee, which is nice. At least I don't have to be constantly going Medicare, Medicaid, Medicare. What? Yeah. Okay, TennCare. Okay. So the 2 programs you're going to hear about most are people of any age who are in a nursing home. That's Choices 1. And Choices 2 is for adults who meet the exact same qualifications and could be in a nursing home, but they have family or some way to live in the community, and there are like 2 or 3 assisted living places that take Choices 2, and you can get a place in assisted living or caregivers at home. It's home and community-based services and some minor home modifications. So you can get about 45 hours of care a week. They have what they call a cost neutrality cap. TennCare is not going to pay more for you to be at home than they would pay for you to be in a nursing home. So there you go. But the same 3 requirements. You have to be sick enough, your income has to be low enough, and your assets have to be low enough. Sick enough is maybe one of the hardest parts. This came out about 8 years ago. It didn't get any press. When it first came out, and you cannot research Medicaid because there are 51 different versions of Medicaid. So if you look at what Medicaid is in Kentucky, you're not going to know a whole lot about what it is in Tennessee. It makes it very hard to figure it out. So the first thing that TennCare looks at is, can you transfer? Can you get out of your bed to a chair, from your chair to the toilet, and back again? If you can never do that, you get 4 points. And then there's usually not, usually in some, whatever. Okay, the next thing they look at is mobility. And TennCare says if you can walk on a walker, you can walk just fine. Okay, so, but if you can never transfer and you can never walk on a walker, those two scores are combined at the end and you can only get 4 points. The next thing is eating, which they define as being able to pick up finger food and eat it without having to be reminded to take each bite. So when this first came out, they didn't have this safety risk part. And if you could never get out of bed, you could never walk with a walker, and you couldn't pick up finger food and eat it, you scored 8 points and weren't sick enough for TennCare to pay for your care in a nursing home. Now, shortly after that, a year after that, it really got no press, they added this safety risk. If it's a risk for you to be at home by yourself, you wander, you have a documented history of falling, then you only have to score 6 points. All right, the next category is toileting, incontinence care, and catheterostomy care, whatever. Catheter or ostomy care. Now, when we become demented, one of the first things that happens is incontinence. But it's when you can't change your own diaper that you get 3 points. And you know, all of us, if we're lucky, are going to get to some point on this scale. The next thing they look is orientation. Do you know who you are and where you are? Expressive communication, self-administration of medication. TennCare, if they hand you a cup of pills and you can swallow it, you don't get any points. But maybe you need injections for your, what am I trying to say? Diabetes. Maybe you need, thank you. Maybe you need injections for your diabetes. Then it begins to count. And finally, if you have combative behavior or whatever, you can get some points. And so this, like I say, this might be the hardest part. Income limits, this is a complete paper tiger. The person that's going into the nursing home or needs care supposedly can't have an income of more than $2,901 a month. There's an easy fix for this. You create a separate account called a qualified income trust, and the extra money goes in that. It's not a big deal. And your spouse's income doesn't count here. Now, you get to keep $70 a month. What about asset limits? For a single person, it's $2,000 or less. But this is so complicated because there's some assets that are countable and some that are not countable, and there are ways to make yeah, it's very complicated. And if you're trying to get on Medicaid, you really ought to talk to somebody. It's not a do-it-yourself project. Okay, now here's one of the best-kept secrets in America. In the 80s, Congress was reading stories about women being so impoverished getting their husbands on Medicaid that they were eating cat food. And we had a client that was working in Kroger at the time, and she said yes, she saw women coming in to get cat food. So Congress passed laws to protect the spouse at home, the spousal anti-impoverishment laws. The spouse at home, called the community spouse, or CS, they add up the assets of both the spouse at home and the spouse that's going into the nursing home. The spouse at home gets to keep half with a minimum of $31,000, $584, these numbers change every year, and a maximum of $157,920. The institutionalized spouse has to spend down to $2,000. So everything above $159,000, I got that wrong, 920, has to be spent down. So a married couple has $150,000, one vehicle, a house worth $150,000, one vehicle, $100,000 in stocks and bonds. Dad's going into the nursing home. The house and the car are non-countable. The spouse, they have to spend down $48,000, right? The spouse at home gets to keep half. The spouse going into the nursing home gets to keep $2,000. Okay. Example 2, they don't have much money, and the spouse at home gets to keep it all. Example 3, a married couple with a house and a car and $500,000 in investments. let me just say, we can get these people on Medicaid. The common misconception is you had to be utterly impoverished to get on Medicaid, and that is not true. You have to meet the qualifications. And so there are ways to spend down the money. You can use a Medicaid compliant annuity. You can do repairs to the house. You can buy the spouse at home a better car. You can buy pre-need funeral policies. You can buy plots for burial. There are a lot of ways to do this. You've probably heard about the 5-year look back. So Medicaid doesn't want you to give your money away and then say, hey, I'm poor, I need to get on Medicaid. So when you apply for Medicaid, they ask you, have you given anything away in the last 5 years? And if you have, they take that amount, let's say you gave away $100,000, they divide it by $85.80 a month, and you have to pay $100,000 is about 12 months. You'd have to pay privately for 12 months unless somebody can undo that gift and give it back to you or whatever. Yeah. And there's a concept called estate recovery. If you're over 55 when you die and you have to go through probate, your estate goes through probate, TennCare is standing there like this and saying, you have to pay me back for what you got. It's complicated. So there's crisis planning and there's planning ahead. If you have 5 years, I would say don't give it to your kids. Put it into what's called an irrevocable trust. Now, an irrevocable trust, first of all, is not truly irrevocable. Weirdly enough, if the grantor, the person who gives the money, the trustee, the person who manages the money, and the beneficiaries, the people who are supposed to get the money, all sign a piece of paper and say we revoke it, it's revoked. You might wonder, well, I've been hearing about revocable living trusts all my life. A revocable trust really is revocable. You are the grantor, you are the trustee, you are the beneficiary. So that's truly irrevocable. But an irrevocable trust that would shield your assets from Medicaid, you are not the trustee and you're not the lifetime beneficiary. And you need to have somebody you trust. You can still have access to the money and you can still revoke the trust. Irrevocable trusts are also called Medicaid Asset Protection Trusts. There's no circumstances listed in which you can get the asset, but you can get the income, but if you get the income, that might go to the nursing home. And the grantors are not the trustees or the lifetime beneficiaries. Now, what I tell people is you lose direct control over your assets, but you maintain indirect control over your assets. So what do I mean by that? So my oldest daughter is Rachel. I say to Rachel, I'd like a new car and I'd like for you to pay yourself that money and then use that money to buy me a car. And she says, Mom, you could just keep driving that Pinto. And I say, honey, you're not the trustee anymore. And by the way, you're not going to get the money when I die either. So you have indirect control over the money. One bad plan, I gave the house to the kids. When I first started, I did a lot of pro bono for 50 Forward. One guy walked in and said, I gave my house to my kids last month. I said, well, I hope they're able to give it back. You know, what if one goes through a bitter divorce, takes bankruptcy, or, God forbid, gets a drug addiction? And there are tax consequences, too, about giving away your house. You don't get that stepped up basis. Another bad plan, I had a friend call and say, well, we spent all of Mom's money, so we thought it was a good time to reach out to a lawyer. Bad plan. Bad plan. At the minimum, you want to put assets where they're going to benefit you, and at your death, pay back TennCare. And at maximum, you might be able to protect your spouse and your assets, at least to some extent. The third component to planning is maintaining our standard of living, finding help with legal planning, income, housing, other resources, finding help with managing chronic conditions. And your real concerns as you age are protecting your assets for the spouse at home or for your children, accessing quality health care, living independently, in the least restrictive environment, maintaining mobility and control, addressing the fear of being isolated, and addressing the fear of going broke. Now, 125 years ago, if you died in 1900, you had a life expectancy of 50. We were really concerned with setting our children up back then. But now that our life expectancy has increased so much, I'm encouraging people to think about having your best possible life. Having your best possible life. Yeah. The usual chronic illness care is your untrained, overwhelmed family members become your default advocates. You get a 15-minute visit. Symptoms and lab reports are the focus. 15-minute visit. I hear that at Vanderbilt they've said 7 minutes for primary care physicians. The focus is on treatment and not the patient's role or the family's role in management of the condition. And you don't get any help in arranging home care, assisted living, or nursing home care. Now, because of that, and everybody in the system has a lawyer except you, because of that, we are among the law firms that do what's called life care planning. We have a fantastic care coordinator with a gerontology degree, which helps our clients manage their care. So in a life care planning firm, clients are assigned a social worker or a care coordinator. This one is somebody with a gerontology degree. And you have somebody advocating in your corner. Now, you're like, why would a law firm do that? Well, because nobody else is. There are some companies that do care management at the low level. I mean, take you to appointments, that kind of care management. But as far as managing, and so many people need the legal work and the care management that, we find that we have a place in this system to help our clients. And, gosh, let's see. I can't remember the percentage, but a huge percentage of people are aging solo. And a lot of that is women that are aging solo. So, you don't have children that are going to help you manage your care. I have 2 daughters, but I'm not sure what they're going to do. I'm not sure, I don't know, and I don't want to be a burden to them. So there you go. We help people manage their care. And who needs a team? Families who've started down the road of one crisis after another, seniors with children who live out of town, orphaned adults, families with levels of anxiety, and families with conflict. And life care planning firms help people get Medicaid and veterans benefits, work with financial planners and accountants. We set our clients up with a Medicare insurance specialist every year. We help find placement. We defend seniors from grasping family members. Wow, we hear some stories. We answer off-the-wall questions. We help plan for income and estate taxes. There are virtually no estate taxes in Tennessee. There are no state taxes for estate tax. There's no Tennessee estate taxes or gift taxes. And the threshold for federal tax is $14 million per person. So we don't worry much about estate taxes or gift taxes. We help with the transition in living arrangements. We help clients plan to stay at home with the right support. We attend care plan meetings. We find lawyers to help clients with other problems. We follow up to make sure clients get the services they are promised. We work with banks. We mediate among siblings. And we help. It's a relationship town. And as far as I know, it's a relationship world. We use our relationships to help our clients get the best services. So we're all just walking each other home. We stole that from Ram Dass. I'm a hippie. If you're a hippie, you're always comfortable in overalls and you cuss.